morning. Welcome back to the Children's Network 28th Annual Conference, Day 2. Nice to see so many of you have returned. I hope you enjoyed the keynote speaker yesterday morning and all of the workshops that you attended, and just kind of like a round of applause maybe for all the work that the Children's Network staff has done. I didn't get to fully explain the wheat story yesterday, and some people have asked me, I thought I might ditch it and not talk about it, but some people have asked me, like, what's with the wheat? So I have to say that. But let me just start by saying that this conference takes us several months to put together. In fact, Monday when we go back to work, we'll probably start reviewing the evaluations, and we really take it very serious what your comments are and how we can improve and things that you would like to see in the following year. So please make sure that you take an opportunity to fill out your evaluation forms. It's the last page of the conference booklet. And you can leave it either in the exhibit hall or there's a box right outside by the information desk, right by the front doors. So either way, please make sure you take a moment to complete that. But as I was saying, it takes us quite a while to do this conference, to put it on, and we will start searching for new keynote speakers and making things better or improving, for next year, as we always do. But let me just say that Christy Lufek has gone above and beyond the call of duty this year, I'd say, and this is almost entirely her doing. Denise McKinney is her wing girl in the exhibit hall, and she does most of our graphics and everything like that. And all of Children's Network registration and all of our volunteers, I want to thank you all very, very much for everything you've done to help us make this an excellent conference once again. Thank you. The wheat. Oh, okay. So the only thing that I contributed, I told you this yesterday, the only thing that I've contributed to this conference was, besides coming up here and introducing folks, is we talk about our centerpieces. We start pretty early because we need to collect stuff, and it takes a while to put things together sometimes. And we're a very small but mighty staff of 9 people. So we don't have the luxury to just have an event committee. We all kind of pitch in and do things throughout the year. So we ordered, I don't know, late spring, early summer, we were talking about centerpieces. And I said, I want to do something fall-like this year because we always do, children's things or buckets and sand and flowers and things like that. So we wanted the fall thing, so we started looking through the catalogs. And I like the wheat, and it's low enough. It's not a tall thing. You can see over the top. So we would decorate around it. So we ordered the wheat. I don't know, there's 50 of them. Is that it? 70 of the little wheat stalks that we ordered. And they came in boxes about this wide, about this deep, maybe 20 or 30 in each box. And when the UPS guy delivered them, he's like, what do you guys have in these boxes? And we're like, oh, I don't know. We don't know what those boxes are. We weren't expecting it so soon, right? There was maybe 10 of the boxes or something. I don't know. And they were just reeking, literally. And then we set them down in a cubicle, and we just left them there for a little while. And pretty soon, our whole side of the office was smelling like this chemical smell. And then the rest of the office, the other half of the office, PDD, which we share an office with, came over, and they're like, what are you guys doing over there? What's going on? It's just awful. So we're like, oh, we better get into these boxes. So we opened up the boxes, and they were filled with the wheat. The wheat was wrapped in cellophane, but there were giant mothballs in there, giant ones, like big marble size, and hundreds of them in it. I had never smelt anything so potent in my life. So we're like, oh my God, we got to get rid of the mothballs. Got rid of all the mothballs, got rid of all the packing. And so then we're left with the wheat in the cellophane. So we think, this will work out. We set it all, laid it all out. About 3 days later, the office is still just reeking of mothballs. Like everybody's like, who's been in Grandma's closet? So we unfolded them and took them out, laid them all out, and about 3 or 4 days later, they began to not smell so bad. And eventually, by today, I think if you sniffed them, you wouldn't smell it at all. But the funny part of it was, we're like, moths, did they just store them that way? Because maybe that works for any kind of critters that might want to get into them. But I was driving up Highland Springs, going to breakfast one morning, and off to the right was a field of wheat. And then into my windshield was moths, just tons of moths. I'm like, oh my God, the moths love the wheat. So I think my dream or my nightmare was we would walk in here yesterday morning after setting up the wheat, and I need not say anymore. It didn't happen, but the convention center said that they would not charge us an exterminator fee if it happened, so we were all good with all that. I just want to take a few moments to recognize some special guests that we have with us here this morning. We have Molly Wiltshire and Lizette Santero from Supervisor Ramos's office. The Honorable Judge Marshall has joined us again. The President and CEO of Children's Fund, Aaron Phillips, is here again. Thanks for coming back, Aaron. And the Operations Manager from First Find, Cindy Faulkner, is here with us this morning. She was here yesterday, but not first thing in the morning, so I didn't get to recognize her. And also we have 4th District Supervisor Gary Ovitt, who will be joining me on the stage in just one moment. Gary Ovitt is the 4th District Supervisor and currently the Vice Chairman for the Board of Supervisors. The 4th District includes the cities of Chino Hills, Montclair, Ontario, and a portion of Upland. The district encompasses 133 square miles and is home to over 400,000 residents. Gary is former chairman of the Board of Supervisors, past president of Southern California Association of Governments, and former chairman and current board member of the San Bernardino County Associated Governments, SANBAG, the Transportation Planning Authority for the county. He previously served as the county representative on the South Coast Air Quality Management District. He is a lifelong educator. He served for 35 years as a teacher and coach. He serves as chairman of the Head Start program for San Bernardino County and is involved in the County School of Alliance for Education Partnership. Supervisor Ovitt and his wife Sue have a daughter Amanda, who's a nurse. Please join me in welcoming Supervisor Ovitt.
Well, good morning. And welcome to the 4th District of San Bernardino County, Ontario. We're right in the middle of it, if you will, right here. And actually, this is where I live. I live in Ontario, so I had a short drive. I shouldn't have been late, and I was, unfortunately. So pleased to be here once again to welcome you to this great conference. We at the county do so much that's so positive for so many, and I really appreciate it. But most importantly, the lives we touch that are young, the young children that you deal with on a daily basis, and the difference that you make in their lives to try to help them so that when they eventually do reach that adulthood, that they will make wise decisions and be great participating members of our society, if you will. You know, we have a vision in the county of San Bernardino that all of us are going to do everything we can to help every child from cradle to career. That means that we're going to provide the health care they need. We're going to provide all of the emotional and the economic needs, hopefully, that they need to get there unscathed, hopefully, to get that great education that's so important, and that is a family responsibility, not just the individual's responsibility, and to get them to that point where they select a career. And hopefully that career will be available in our county for them to work here so that we don't lose that capital, that human capital that is so important that we've nurtured from the very beginning. And so that's what we're looking to do. And you folks make such a huge difference in that. We do appreciate all that you do. You know, there's a quote from John Quincy Adams, who is a president of ours, and he said, "If your actions inspire others to dream more, to learn more, to do more, and to become more, then you are a leader." And what you are doing is truly leadership responsibilities, and we thank you for that. And you truly are inspiring others each and every day, and we appreciate that so much. You know, the workshop today has a lot of things that are just very valuable. Obviously, it's going to touch on the idea of homelessness and how you can work and make a difference in that regard. Talking about trauma and grief. Unfortunately, our children do have to deal with it. I guess some of us have to deal with that as well, all too often these days. And so you're You're going to have an opportunity to learn more about that if you choose to go to that particular domestic violence-oriented breakout session. Strengthening families through effective parenting and the importance of the father's involvement. That is so important, so important. As a father and as a former teacher, I realize how large a role a father needs to play in the issues that our society faces today based on the fact that we have far too many families where the father has not done his job, not taken on his responsibility. And so it's so important that we emphasize that over and over again. You know, the YMCA has a really strong motto or mission, if you will, and it's all about building strong kids, strong families, and strong communities. And that's really what we're doing here today as well, is following that same model to try to build up our community by building up each individual kid first and their families as well. So I'm really pleased to be a part of that. I know you have SART, Screening, Assessment, Referral, and Treatment, and I know that when it first started in the West End, it is right across the street from my home. So I had a chance to go to that and see the wonderful job that they're doing. And in fact, West End Family Counseling, who contracts with the county, plays a big role in that. And Jed Schaefer, for those of you who may have known Jed, is just retiring as of now. And so I just went to his retirement soiree, I guess you would call him. Very nice. What a wonderful man he is. And but West End Family Counseling will continue to work with you to make a difference in the lives of children and adults as well. You also, I know, are involved with CASE, the Coalition Against Sexual Exploitation, which is a big issue out here, especially with our airport and everything else. So there's a breakout session for that as well, and I appreciate that. Strategies for children with autism, such a big issue. And I was just hearing on the television the other day that if you don't recognize as a parent or as someone involved in the life of a young child by the age of 3, your child could, their trajectory is not as good as it could be. So we need to recognize these things very early in one's life. Also, they thought I'd be interested in technology into school-based practices about computer games and how those improve cognition. Well, I'm not into computer games, so I realize that it is important, and our children need to learn the skills getting through a computer and working with those kinds of things. You can teach so much through a computer in that. But I typically end up playing solitaire or something else, so I'm not into shooting and whatever. But those are great, and that would be an excellent one for me to attend as well, to learn more about how we can use the fun things to help teach our young people how to get through the computer and work on the technology of the computer, if you will. Most importantly, I wanted to emphasize the County of San Bernardino is all about innovative ways of working together to make things happen for families in a positive way. You have done, over the years, you have done such a wonderful job of bringing together your talents, your energies, your gifts from God to make a difference in the lives of children and their families. And that's what San Bernardino County should be very proud of, because we have a wonderful reputation, and I appreciate that, and it's based on the fact that you folks are making a difference for each of these children's lives. And so I thank you for that. I'm just excited to be here today and to learn more about how we can make a difference in people's lives and how we can make the future of this region so much better because of our involvement in the children's lives at an early age. Thank you for what you do. May God bless you in all of that, and I look forward to hearing more from people who know something and I don't. Thank you very much.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning. Jennifer Rodriquez is an attorney and the executive director of the Youth Law Center, a national public interest law firm that works to protect the rights of children in foster care and the juvenile justice system. She earned her JD law degree from the University of California, Davis in 2004. As a former foster youth who also spent time in the juvenile justice institution, she has a strong passion for systemic legal advocacy on behalf of the children and the youth who, like her, are growing up with a government agency as their only family. In her current role as advocate, Jennifer uses the skills she first developed years ago as a youth living in an institutional care, pushing for appropriate staff respect, adequate food, clothing, and freedom. Jennifer began her formal advocacy as a youth leader and legislative manager in the California Youth Connection, CYC, leading policy efforts to evaluate the voices of experience of the thousands of California foster youth. Her advocacy at CYC resulted in major legislative accomplishments for California foster youth, including the first foster youth bill of rights, stronger educational rights, funding to support higher education, expansion of housing and transition services, and increased focus on placing youth in family settings rather than in institutional care. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Rodriquez to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm so pleased to be with you all today, and I'm particularly pleased to hear all of the different entities that are here in the room this morning in San Bernardino County. I'm actually traveling here en route from just leaving a federal commission. I had the honor last year of being appointed by President Obama to a commission that is tasked with ending child fatalities due to abuse or neglect, which sounded overwhelming initially. It sounded as if we're solving poverty, mental illness, substance abuse. And we're still trying to figure out exactly what the specific policy changes and funding needs are to better protect our most vulnerable children. But the one thing that's become completely clear is that we have thought about the job of protecting our most vulnerable kids as solely a child protective services function up to this point. And the reality is that that job belongs to everyone. It belongs to our health providers, it belongs to our domestic violence enforcers, it belongs to our child welfare system, it belongs to our parents, it belongs to our community at large. So being at events like this where you are in a community that truly gets that it takes early childhood and the schools and law enforcement and all of our community groups to come together to talk about how we do things better for our most at-risk kids. It's really an honor, and I want to tell you, you are ahead of the curve. Today, I am here to talk with you about sort of our vision for how we can make sure that some of the most vulnerable children in our community, children who are in the foster care and the juvenile justice system, have the opportunity to thrive, to get on that pathway that you heard mentioned earlier to a successful and productive career and a happy and healthy life. And it is my opinion, I know that you all work with many populations of children. Some of you work with children who are in the foster care system. Some of you may work with children in the juvenile justice system. And some of you may work with children who you hope never enter either one of those systems. But it's my opinion that what we learn works for this group of very, very vulnerable children. It works for all children who are at risk, whereas the opposite is not always true. These children have such specific needs around trauma, around services, around support, around family engagement, that services, programs, policies really have to be customized to sort of meet those very extreme and challenging needs. But before I talk a little bit about that, I want to tell you first about who the Youth Law Center is, and then a little bit about how I personally came into this work. So the Youth Law Center, as you heard, we're a national public interest advocacy organization. We are lawyers, but I think in contrast to what some of you may think of when you hear of a legal advocacy organization and advocates, our job is not just litigation. In fact, litigation is the smallest piece of what we do. Our work, much more, if I were to sum up what we do is we work with developmental experts, researchers on child development, on brain science, on youth development. We hear what they're learning in the lab, in their classrooms, as they do research and study, and we think about how to take that research and apply it to the field, apply it to child welfare, apply it to juvenile justice. Because what we've learned is those systems were constructed almost completely isolated from what we know about good practice developmentally and good practice related to brain science and developmental needs of children. And so the way that we do that is through a whole variety of means. Sometimes it's litigation. That's really a last alternative for us. Oftentimes it's through policy work, but increasingly over the past 5 to 10 years, we have been working collaboratively with jurisdictions across the county. Your jurisdiction, San Bernardino County, is actually one of the many counties that we work collaboratively with. We are here in San Bernardino County working with your juvenile probation system on a program that I'll talk a little bit more about later called our Baby Elmo Teen Parenting Program. But that has been our approach in recent years, is to identify places where folks aren't happy with outcomes for children, aren't happy with the experiences children are facing, and to work sort of hand in hand on trying to improve and make things better. And I say that because that leads into why I chose to come spend my career at the Youth Law Center. It's a huge honor to be the executive director, but my sort of interaction and experience with the Youth Law Center goes way back. When I first started as a youth member of the California Youth Connection back in 1999, our office was actually, the California Youth Connection's office was housed within the Youth Law Center's office. And I remember more than anything else looking up to the attorneys that worked in that office and hearing how they talked about and dealt with issues that came across their path. And in particular, the past executive director, Carol Schofer, I remember was the first person I had ever heard in my entire life who seemed to treat the complaints, the concerns of every single child in the foster care and the juvenile justice system with the level of outrage and urgency as if it was her own child. And this was something that I so admired and respected because it's not a way that I thought people dealt with concerns of children who grew up in care like I did. My idea growing up in care was that we were by and large forgotten, and that when people thought about our needs and thought about what needed to be done for us, that we got thought of as sort of the other children. It didn't seem to me that anybody did anything that they would feel they would want for their own child. It seemed to me that we got left in situations that no parent would ever feel okay about leaving their own child in. So hearing that the Youth Law Center's approach was to focus on every single child as if it was their own child and make it just that simple, I knew that was the place that I wanted to grow up and become an adult and go work. I never dreamed that at some point I would be running the Youth Law Center, so I frequently still have to pinch myself that I'm now a lawyer and the executive director there. But it's certainly what drew me to that work. As you heard, my passion for this work really stems from my personal background. I was born actually into the child welfare system, and so when people ask me how long I've been an advocate, I never really know how to answer that question. Professionally or when I was rabble-rousing in my group homes. Don't know which one to sort of start that first day at. But I was born to a mom who was severely mentally ill, paranoid schizophrenic, and a father who was incarcerated. So my family probably looked a lot like the families that many of you serve. And so my case was immediately known to our child welfare system. I spent most of my early childhood bouncing back and forth between my mom's home and various foster homes. My mom's illness was such that I was absolutely terrified. I was sure at some point my mom was going to kill me. All of her paranoia was directed at me, and various individuals in the community knew what was happening in our family but were scared and reluctant to intervene. My mom came to school, ended up being violent and pushing me down a hill, broke my collarbone in front of teachers and the principal at the school. My mom was hospitalized multiple times in psychiatric hospitals and in front of law enforcement officials and psychiatric hospital staff, threatened to kill me and was violent with me. But nobody felt they knew exactly what to do to help our family. And so people, by and large, sat back. They let the child welfare system take its toll. They hoped that the courts and the mental health system would be able to intervene. And this went on until I was 10 years old and suddenly magically figured out that the front door to my house was not locked, that I could walk out at any point in time. And so at the age of 10, I had the happiest day of my life when I opened up the front door to my house and I left, ran away. I spent the next 2 years living on the street in San Francisco, and so by the time I turned myself back into the child welfare system at the age of 12, I came in with an arrest record for prostitution, an arrest record for shoplifting. I came in sort of having experienced things that no 12-year-old should have ever experienced. And the ironic thing was that I remember how horrified caseworkers were and staff were in the group homes and facilities where I lived at 12, 13, 14. Remember how horrified they would be when they got my case file and they saw the type of things I'd been charged with. And they had no idea that I was so much more free, so much more peaceful being out on the street than I had ever been living in my own home. So coming into CARE, I definitely already had the idea that adults were not to be trusted. You certainly couldn't trust them with your well-being. You definitely couldn't trust them with your body. They frequently looked at us as commodities. That was how I felt when I was on the street. It didn't really change when I got into foster care, and I knew I was more or less a paycheck to a number of people who were working with me. But I will say this, by and large, oftentimes I hear folks talk about the child welfare system overreaching, and I think sometimes it does. In my case, that social worker who made the decision to intervene with my family, that judge who terminated my mother's parental rights and kept me in foster care up to the age of 18, those are probably the people that are responsible for saving my life. And so I want to just say today, all of you who are here in this room who have some role like that, I know oftentimes I'm asked by people, well, have you ever gone back and told people how things ended? And most of you probably know I have not. You don't get to hear the ending of your stories. You don't get to hear the ending of the hard work and the efforts and the services and the heart and soul that you pour into the work with children and families. So I see myself sort of as a messenger here today to tell you all thank you. I'm sure there are multiple children and families who, like for me, you saved their life. When I came into CARE at the age of 12, obviously because of my background, I wasn't looked at as a child who was suitable for a family placement. I was definitely a child who had a lot of needs and a lot of trauma to work through. So as a result, my very first placement was a group home placement, a pretty high-level group home placement. And for any of you who are familiar with the child welfare system, you know that once you get into a group home placement, it is very, very difficult to ever get out of a group home placement. And particularly at the age of 12, you're in that developmental stage where you learn, and what you learn from your peers. And so I quickly learned from the other young women and young men that I lived in the homes with a number of really interesting skills, such as how to steal a group home van, how to cuss out a staff exactly so that I could make them quit and cry if I wasn't happy with them. How to, if I was angry, instead of lashing out and getting my level dropped, how to cut on myself so that instead they'd put me on a psychiatric hold and I'd get moved out of whatever placement I was unhappy with. None of which skills were helpful at all to giving me any chance to live in a family, which is ironic because that is the one thing that I most desperately wanted, was to be a part of a family, wanted a mother. Growing up in my home, I had never had the chance to actually be part of a family, never had the chance to sit down and have a regular family dinner with anybody or have somebody ask me about how my day was in a way that wasn't designed to then take notes in the staff log. I really wanted to be a part of a family. However, my behavior said the opposite because I didn't know how to actually express the type of loneliness and grief and pain that I had from feeling like I was completely alone in the world. So for the next 6 years, as I think happens with a lot of young people, my behavior got worse as I wanted to be in a family more, and my chances of ever having the opportunity to live in a family decreased down lower and lower and lower till they basically hit zero at the age of 16. When I hit 16 in foster care, my life was a disaster, more or less. I was on probably my second round of dozen institutional placements. I had been in and out of group homes, shelters, juvenile hall, psychiatric hospitals. I knew exactly how to work the system to get out of any placement I didn't want to be in. I looked forward. My favorite placements were being at the shelter and being at juvenile hall and the psych hospital, where at least they were co-ed. There were boys also in the places where I was living, and that was frequently how I made my decision making. It wasn't around where the best place might be, wasn't around where I'd be able to stay at the same school. It was going to be around where I could sort of get into the most trouble and have the most fun. At 16, I also had pretty much lost hope in any chance of being able to do well in school. And this is really unfortunate because now I know school was probably my only chance to actually have a different life and to get on a track where I actually could have left care with a solid foundation. But I had been put in special education while I was in middle school in classes for severely emotionally disturbed students, and so had spent most of my school years sort of in that trailer in the special school, coming to school on the little yellow bus. So the last thing I was getting was anything that looked anything like an education that might provide me a solid foundation for the future. I never had a regular English class, math class, history class. I had gotten used to only having to go to school from 8:30 in the morning to 11:50 every single day. I had been put on so many psychotropic medications in the homes that I was living that I was sort of barely cognizant while I was sitting in my classroom every morning. When I came into care, not surprisingly, at 12, I had been on the streets for 2 years and so could not sleep at night. My body was used to being up all night and sleeping during the daytime, which doesn't work well in an institutional care facility, so I was immediately put on medication to make me sleepy at nighttime. Of course, the medication that makes you sleepy at nighttime also makes you sleepy in the morning. And so I found myself unable to sort of wake up and be conscious and not groggy when I would have to go to school in the morning. So I was put on medication in the morning to make me perk up, antidepressants, which then made me jittery and shaky and I couldn't sit down. So this is what my teachers in all my special education classrooms were dealing with from me every single day. Head on the desk until about 10:05, at which time I'd pop up and pace the classroom like a little lion in a cage. None of which, again, just like my desire to get out of a group home and into a family, I had that desire to be in a regular classroom, to learn. None of this behavior helped at all. It meant that pretty much I was staying in special education until I turned 18, which was a shame because the one skill that I did have, and probably just about the only thing I had going in my life at that point in time, was something that nobody in the child welfare system knew about, and that's that I was a reader. Reading for me was my escape mechanism. It was the way that I coped with my life and my circumstance. I could open up a book and pretend that I was anybody, that I had any life. I learned about how other people felt things and experienced things through reading stories about other people's lives. Biographies were my favorite. I felt like in foster care and in many of my placements, the world was so small. We didn't have access to anything except for foster kid stuff. We'd go to, even the plays that we'd go to, I remember where we'd go on the night that was specifically for system kid night. So it was everybody in their group home staff would get transported to the play, and we'd all kind of throw stuff at each other all night long while we were supposed to be watching the play. But our world was really small. So for me, reading and books were sort of the only way that I had access to what was happening out there and to the idea that my life didn't have to be the way that it was and that there might be some other future after I left care. So because I was a reader and that's what I spent a good amount of my time doing, wasn't a runner in my group homes, wasn't for the most part a cutter or a cusser or a fighter, I read. Because of that, I probably could have done well in regular classes, at least in English. But nobody ever knew about that because my behavioral problems masked that. So by the time I turned 18, I had absolutely no credits whatsoever. I had moved so many times and so every single semester that I had not even sort of behind 20, behind 40, behind 100. I had nothing on my transcript. It looked as if I had not gone to school at all for high school. I had never had a regular class, never gotten to read like any of the great books or look through a microscope or learn how to do even long division. I was limited in that way. The only job experience I had was one summer, my group home had a deal with the Conservation Corps, and we got to go dig ditches for the summer, which is not really all that helpful out in the real world to sticking on your resume. I get to be proud to this day. If any of you ever visit San Jose, go see the San Jose Rose Garden, the Egyptian Rose Garden. I planted those roses. But nobody cared about that when I was an 18-year-old walking into folks' offices trying to apply for a job. So at 18, I ended up right full circle, sort of back where I started. At the age of 12, I ended up back on the street again. I didn't have a single relationship with any adult. I had no idea how to navigate any world outside of a group home. I knew exactly how to learn any level system under the sun, numbers, colors, points, you name it. I can learn it in about half an hour and master exactly how it works. None of that has any bearing whatsoever to what you need to do when you're an 18-year-old needing to survive on your own. So I was stuck once again, but I did know how to use a library. And so after a couple months of being out on the street, I found my way into my favorite spot, the library. I cannot tell you how many times in my life the library and the children's librarian and the reference librarian saved my life, quite literally. Made my way into the library, went to a resource guide, opened it up, and was looking for a place where I could enter just to sleep, a homeless shelter, and read a little description about Job Corps. And to me, Job Corps sounded like winning the lottery. You got to live there for free. You got to get your GED. You got to get vocational training. And to me, all of those things sounded fabulous. They'd pay you for doing those things. So I immediately saw that the way to enroll was to go to this Women in Community Services office. I showed up there that day, and the first question they asked me was, sure, tell us, we need some information. You were in foster care. Tell us the places where you live so we can start getting your case records. Of course, I could only remember the last address where I had been at. I'd only been there for a few months. So I gave them that, and they started the long process of trying to gather my case records. So at that time, and I think it's still true at this point, the problem with Job Corps for young people who have been in foster care in the juvenile justice system is that it's a zero-tolerance facility. If you've been arrested for anything violent, if you've been on psychotropic medications and you have serious mental health issues, Job Corps is not the program for you. And I didn't know this as I started getting my case records. But what saved me and gave me the opportunity, and really that was the opportunity that I used to launch my life, was that I was also homeless. And so I had no place to go during the daytime. So I stayed there in that Women in Community Services office, and I did what I actually most like doing. I'm a helper. So I ran errands for people, got them coffee, answered the phone, filed papers. And by the time my records started trickling in, they could see that the child that they had in front of them, sitting there, answering their phone, didn't look much like the kid that they were reading about on the pieces of paper, who sounded like they were barely able to sort of make it through the day and maintain without slapping somebody or stealing something or running away. So they decided to stop. They stopped gathering my case records, they stopped asking any more questions, and they simply let me in, which was the first of many, many people in my life who decided to go a little bit above and beyond, and who gave me a second chance and a third chance that I used to full advantage. And it's part of the reason that I believe what I believe today, which is that's what we have to be about for our kids and families, our second chances, third chances, progressive opportunities. Oftentimes when people ask me, what is your story? How did you land from there to here? I tell people I'm reluctant to tell you because it's not my story. How I landed from there to here, it's actually the stories of many, many individuals who all gave me a chance and who did a little bit more than what their job description dictated that they do. Got into Job Corps, and I directly give Job Corps credit for my confidence that allowed me to think of doing something so ballsy as going to law school. Because when I got into Job Corps, what they did at that facility is everybody who came in with no high school diploma had to take a GED, had to complete their GED, and the first step to that was doing an assessment test. And what this Job Corps did was very cute, which is that they looked at our assessment tests, and whoever scored the highest on each categories, they threw us into something called the Academic Olympics, the Job Corps Academic Olympics. And so, of course, I miserably failed in math and history and social studies and all of the other subjects that would have required me to be taught something. However, in spelling and vocabulary and comprehension, highest score in the center. So I was officially the Job Corps Literature Academic Olympics representative. And so Job Corps stuck me up on a stage, threw words at me like a spelling bee. I got to answer those words in front of the entire audience of my peers at Job Corps. And literally within a day, I went from, in my mind, special education Jennifer to smart Jennifer. That's, I'm one of a million Jennifers of my generation. And so whenever people would say Jennifer, it would have to be Jennifer who? Jennifer, tall Jennifer, short Jennifer. I was smart Jennifer in our Job Corps Center, a word which had never been attached to me in my entire life, but who I became to come. As people started looking at me as smart Jennifer, that started to be how I saw myself and started to be how I could picture my future, picture my path. And so we won in San Jose. We went on to compete regionally, ended up going all the way to Phoenix Job Corps, and finally lost to Phoenix. It was really hot there. I think that's why we lost. But that's neither here nor there. The point is that Job Corps was the place where I got to finally sort of have a fresh slate, a completely clean slate, and re-envision the way that I saw my life. And so from Job Corps, I was able to leave, get a job, start community college. And at community college, I met another person who completely changed my life. I had a teacher at community college who mentored me, took me under her wing, and dreamed a really big dream for me, and I will tell you, tricked the heck out of me. I started community college wanting to be a medical assistant because it was the smallest amount of units. It was a 6-unit program, and she just kept raising the bar on me. Well, why don't you do 6 more and be an LVN? And if you're going to be an LVN, why don't you do 1 more year and be an RN? Look, they make double the money. And pretty soon she had me thinking I could go to medical school, at which point in time I realized don't like needles, don't like blood, get really nervous when people are like coughing or throwing up on me. So probably being a doctor is not the thing for me, but if I thought I could be a doctor, I could probably be anything that I wanted to be, and what I really wanted to be was an advocate. And so that was when I decided that law school was the place for me. So that's how I landed where I am today. It's how I came to the Youth Law Center. It's absolutely why I believe what I believe about change being possible for young people, about the importance of each and every one of us stepping up and doing all that we can do, plus a little bit more for every child, family who comes across our path. And how I know many of you, you don't get to hear the happy ending, again, for the results that you put in, but you have to know and trust that everything you do makes a difference. And so with that, I want to tell you a little bit about what we've learned at the Youth Law Center from working with our developmental expert partners and sort of this overall vision for where we need to go as a field with children in the child welfare and the juvenile justice system, and as I said, I think all children who are at risk. So many of you know these statistics probably off the back of your hand, but I just want to tell you, for any of you who aren't familiar, I'm grabbed education because that's an easy sort of marker to tell you where are these children sort of in relationship to society and to their opportunities in the future. What we know about young people who are in foster care in the juvenile justice system is that in contrast to other groups of children, they have challenges that are much greater and much more distinct from other children who are socioeconomically disadvantaged and challenged. We know they're more likely to change schools. They're more likely to attend the schools that are struggling the most, are low performing. They're also in non-traditional schools. They also have lower test participation rates. They're not even getting on the map to be counted so that we can assess how well they're doing. We see that they have an achievement gap in all of their exams. We see far more youth in foster care in the juvenile justice system who are below basic and far below. We know that they have the highest dropout rates, the lowest graduation rates, and then the lowest rates of entry into college. And then once they are in college, if they're lucky enough to get there, they have the lowest college graduation rates of any group. And then all of that translates into the highest rates of under and unemployment. So we know that as a group, these young people who need us the most, who have the most challenges, who need the most support, they're faring the worst. So that's the bad news. I don't like talking about that for long. Where I'd rather go is to talk about where are the opportunities. And there are a lot of opportunities. We know so much more now than we ever knew about where the points for intervention actually are. We know so much more about youth development and brain research. We know that actually brains are always developing, that there are some key points, early childhood, teen years, where we can really make a difference and where we can actually literally create new pathways in children and young people's brains that will allow them to actually take advantage of programs and services in a much greater way. We have a much greater understanding of the impact of abuse and neglect and trauma and how to develop services that are responsive to those experiences and don't exacerbate the things that young people have already experienced. We also have a wide and flourishing field of youth development where people have studied what the protective factors are for young people and who can provide us a lot of practice and policy tips about how to design our services to capitalize on young people's strengths. In my case, it would have been capitalizing on my love of reading, as opposed to focusing on deficits and trying to create services that eliminate those deficits. We also have a ton of educational innovations, things that have the potential of closing those achievement gaps. We're in an age of technology. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Khan University. Many of you are. Sort of a literal free online university where you can go on and study in any subject you want to, take classes that progressively build. Anybody today can go home and start on the path to learning everything there is to know about computer engineering, chemistry, math, social sciences, which to me is exciting because it represents for our young people who are in systems what books represented to me. It means no matter, even if we aren't able to fix our system to make sure that they get a great education, that they stay in one place, that they have the stability that they need to succeed in school, we have this as a safety net where we can make sure that young people are engaged, that they have the opportunity to learn and to learn at their own pace and to learn about the things that fascinate them. We also have a much stronger policy structure in place than we ever did. We have rights for education, rights for youth who are in both the juvenile justice system and the foster care system that pretty much guarantee that what happened to me, hitting 18 and not having any credits at all, will never happen to a single other young person. We have extended foster care. We have 3 more years for our young people who are in foster care or probation supervised foster care to make sure that we get them into a family, that we give them the chance to get into high school and to start college, to help them get on that pathway to career. We have lots of higher education supports. When I mentioned earlier that our young people who are in foster care and the juvenile justice rate have some of the lowest graduation rates overall, I should have said, with one exception, except for those young people who are in a Guardian Scholars type program. Many colleges and universities across California and actually in some other states now as well have started campus support programs where a dedicated staff person on that campus sort of mamas and mentors all of the young people who came from foster care or came from juvenile justice system, helps them get early registration, navigate the financial aid system, get tutoring when they need and extra supports. And what we found is that students who are in these programs actually have graduation rates that are higher than the general population, higher than for students who have been at one great high school for their entire time in care. So we know so much more now about how to help young people be successful. We also have Medi-Cal up to the age of 26. And while this seems like something specific and small, for young people who have been in foster care, it's critical. Most of us leave foster care with many, many health needs, both physical health needs and mental health needs. Many of us leave foster care. The statistics say the majority of us will be parenting by the time we're 21. That extension of Medi-Cal up to the age of 26 for our young people who have been in foster care provides them sort of that basic ability to be well as they navigate all the challenges of moving towards adult life. We also are in a move to de-incarcerate young people who are in the juvenile justice system. We are starting to take that body of knowledge that we know about in child welfare, that young people heal and do best in families, in our communities, and transfer that over to our youth and juvenile justice to say, we know that even one contact with being in a juvenile justice institution, a detention facility, even if it's for only a day, ends up decreasing the chances that a young person will do well and increasing the chances that they will re-enter a juvenile detention facility at some point in time. So we are starting to think about how to do that. How do we bring our young people home, back into the community, give them that environment of a family where they can really heal? And we also have growing opportunities for youth involvement and advocacy. So I didn't tell you the story about my involvement in the California Youth Connection, but what I will say is that that chance to take all of the things that happened to me and think about how to change policy and practice so that they never happen to one more child has been absolutely transformational for me. It led me from thinking of myself and my experience as sort of a burden and a victim to feeling like it happened for a reason. It happens that I was able to make sure that other young people grow up well and safe. So with that, I will say that as opposed to thinking about foster care and juvenile justice as sort of a sad intervention, what I think we know now is that they actually can be the opportunity for a lot of our young people and a lot of our families to have the opportunity to get on that pathway to thriving. What we know about youth development and brain research, this to me, the most exciting thing ever. I think it's, if you leave with one thing today, this is what I hope you leave with. What we know is that relationships are incredibly powerful for our young people who are in foster care. I know many of you have probably followed the research, probably done the research, been involved in some way around looking at what the impact is of adverse early experiences and knowing about all those experiences that happen before children are 5, if they're negative, how devastating they can be, not just for the immediate sort of childhood, but in the long term of children's lives. One really exciting piece of research, which I'm going to sort of give you the Reader's Digest version of so that I don't take too much time, but that definitely changed the way I looked at foster care overall and gave me hope, was that there's a researcher out of the University of Delaware named Mary Dozier who studied children who have been removed from their home and placed in foster care and was looking specifically at the fact that every single child who we remove has an abnormal level of cortisol. Now, cortisol is the hormone in our body that helps us deal with stress, and it's really important because our cortisol level is set for life by the time we're 3 years old. Whatever your cortisol level is when you're 3, it will continue to be that for the duration of your life. Having an abnormal level of cortisol, it's attributed with every single bad outcome we hear about for former foster youth. Substance abuse, mental illness, juvenile delinquency, not doing well in school. So this sounds like sort of terrible, depressing news, and it makes sense. As human beings, we are hardwired to attach to a caregiver, and when we step in and artificially separate children from their caregivers, even if it's to save their life, their biological systems react. What Mary did was she actually decided to see if she could do anything to counteract that effect. And so what she did was really simple. She brought foster parents and relative caregivers to her lab in Delaware. She worked with them for a little bit over a week and basically trained them how to spoil their kids to like an ultimate degree. She told them every single time your baby cries, you pick that baby up. No timeouts, only time ins, lots of loving and delighting and eye-to-eye contact and physical contact with your baby. She sent those caregivers back home and undertook a rigorous research study measuring the child's cortisol levels as time progressed. What she found is that those foster parents and relative caregivers, they were able to completely normalize those children's cortisol levels to look exactly as if they had never experienced abuse or neglect, to look as if they had never been removed from their home. How long do you guys think this took? Any guesses? Just shout it out. Here, 2 weeks? 6 months? 30 days? 3 years? So the answer is 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, those foster parents were completely able to change those children's biological systems to better equip them to move on for the entire rest of their life by doing those few very simple things. Essentially, what her work told us is that in contrast to the way that we typically think about our foster parents and caregivers in the child welfare system as sort of being the babysitters, the placements, the person with the right amount of square footage, bed and dresser, that instead these people are the intervention. These people that are dedicating their lives to caring for kids, they are the thing that can heal our kids. They are the foundation of our child welfare system. And so we have to completely change our system to acknowledge their role and wrap our services around them, because they are the most powerful thing that we can give for our children who have been abused and neglected. So this sounds wonderful, but it also sounds challenging for most people who are in the child welfare system who say, where are all these families? Because we barely have enough families to care for the kids that we have in care right now, today, at this moment. Well, we have a lot more tools. We have family finding efforts. We know how to use technology. All of you know if any one of us can go online and find our boyfriend or our girlfriend from 7th grade in like a matter of 5 minutes, we certainly can find young people's families, and we can especially find fathers. I will say in child welfare, one of the things, as you heard earlier, that we don't acknowledge is how important fathers are. We act oftentimes as if they don't exist. And fathers are fathers, and they're a wonderful resource, but the paternal family is also another incredible resource. I'll never forget meeting Kevin Campbell, who sort of was the innovator of family finding. I met him probably about 7 years ago, and he was just starting to use U.S. Search and working with child welfare systems to help them improve their family finding efforts. And he, in the course of 5 minutes, taking my father's information, found me 30 paternal relatives that all live down here in Southern California, who I was never aware of, and who, once I went and met them, they never knew I was in foster care. I could have had an entirely different life if folks had just used the technology that was available, that we all know about because we've used it to stalk, or maybe not stalk, exes, best friends from our past. We also know a lot more about specialized recruitment and how to actually support relationships once we identify family. We also have a much deeper and better understanding of early childhood. We know about how important those early years are. We know about how caregivers and the parenting relationship, actually, that is the early care and education. Caregivers back and forth with babies, that's what's giving them the linguistic foundation to be able to learn to read, to be able to be successful in school. Caregivers being responsible to children when they cry or they're angry is helping them to learn the emotional self-regulation they are going to need to sit in a classroom and to deal with conflict when somebody steals their milk or their cookie. We know how important parenting is. And for these children who are in the foster care system, we know it's critical that we think at every juncture about parenting if we don't have them in a setting where they're getting that normally. We also know we can get a lot of bang for our buck on early intervention, that if there's any point in time where we can get a huge return for a relatively small investment, it's those early years of life. I mentioned earlier our Baby Elmo program. It's one of my favorite programs. Here in San Bernardino, we are working in the juvenile hall with youth who have been tried as adults. And in this project, all we do is we developed with Georgetown University a parenting intervention that teaches those young people, and we have many fathers that participate in this program, how to do simple things like follow their child's lead, how to understand separation anxiety, how to praise their baby, how to play lap games and have physical contact. What we hear over and over and over from the young people who participate in this project is that this is all so new to them because they have never been praised in their life. Nobody has ever cared about what they do, let alone follow their lead. We're teaching these young people, even those who have the most challenging current situations, how to be there for their child and to try to prevent their child from having similar experiences in the future. Another area where we know we can target and get a lot of results is for all of our young people who are in the child welfare system currently, who are either parenting right now or will be parenting in a number of years. We have an obligation to these young people when we target them and wrap services around them and support them and do more than just remove their children or threaten them with that. We actually have a point in time where we can really make the difference, not just for one generation, but for 2 generations of kids. We also know so much more about trauma-informed services. I talked about this before, but one of the things that every system is thinking about is making a conscious effort to not replicate trauma and harmful conditions. A perfect example of this is in our child welfare system, very little attention has ever been given to children transitioning from a home. We've typically thought when a child moves from a foster home to be reunified back with their birth family or to an adoptive home, that that's the happy ending, and we don't need to pay a lot of attention to how we do that transition. However, what we hear time and time again from children and from families is the way that we do that transition, the court ordering child should be reunified immediately. Social worker shows up for the child, says, pack your stuff, you're going home today. And nobody ever has a chance to say goodbye to that child. The other children in the home are devastated that we're replicating that trauma. And so many systems are trying to think through that. How do we reconstruct our systems to be really aware of what children have already experienced and make sure they don't have to experience more? Positive youth development. We know what the protective factors are for youth development. We know strong parenting, first and foremost. If we have our young people, particularly our teens, living in settings where they are not being parented, but they're being supervised, like our group home placements or our institutional placements or our detention facilities, we have to figure out how to get them parented. Shift staff simply don't do it. Every single child needs that protective factor of having somebody who is their mother, who's going to be there and really care about them, even once they leave the system. That goes along with, we know how important education is, health is, transitional services are, and having those pro-social, recreational, and leisure experiences, getting our young people who are in foster care and juvenile justice system involved in things like debate club, football, gymnastics, yoga, whatever floats their boat, giving them the chance to construct a new identity, just as I had the chance to do in Job Corps when I became the academic Olympian for Job Corps. Talked already a little bit about educational innovation. We know that for our young people, we really have to be looking at high-quality educational options and understanding that just because our young people are in foster care or at one point in juvenile hall, that alternative schools cannot be the default for them. There are some alternative schools that are great and are very high quality. However, there are other alternative schools where the focus is not on a high quality education. It is not on getting children on a path to college and career. And many of our children are in these systems not because of an educational deficit, but because of poor decision making, being in the wrong environment, behavioral sort of issues or challenges. But they are perfectly equipped to learn. And so we need to make sure that we don't just think because a child is system involved that an alternative school is the option. We also know we have funding streams that we are not taking very good advantage of. For example, neglected and delinquent funding provides every single jurisdiction with a lot of funding. We don't know a lot about what these funds get used for. What we do know is that oftentimes our children, they are not the squeaky wheel, they are not the mouth that's begging because they do not have parents who are there banging at the door and advocating for their needs, so that frequently our children do not have their needs met. We also have the opportunity now, all of you I'm sure are following what's happening with LCFF and this new opportunity to get some funding streams dedicated to our children who have been in foster care, to really make sure that we get some services and programs that will actually meet their needs. We have a strong policy structure that we never had before. Of course, policy is only as good as people use it and apply it on the ground. But I mentioned many of the things that we have at this point. I will say with extended foster care, it's an incredible opportunity. Having that 3 more years of a safety net or a cushion to give to our young people is invaluable, if nothing else, to allow them just to develop. Just to have a little bit more brain maturity, to make better decisions, to allow them to have a place to return to when it all falls apart. I cannot tell you at 18 I was dying to get out of my group home until I was on the street the next day, and then I was dying to go back to my group home. So we have to really allow our young people to go out there to experience the world, and when things fall apart, to give them a safety net to return to as many times as that needs to happen. And the youth involvement and advocacy. I can't say enough about how important and empowering it is to have young people both really involved in the decisions that are made about their specific cases, but also being involved as you start thinking about system changes as a whole. For any of you that are running programs to making sure that your young people are an important part of advising your policy development, your program development, that they're giving you feedback on what they like or what they don't like about the way that the programs run. It's really important so that we provide services that actually are effective and meaningful, but also so that young people start feeling some sense of agency. One of the things that we do in child welfare and in the juvenile justice system is we have all these other entities that make the decisions. The court, your social worker, your lawyer, everybody's making decisions about your life. And when you turn 18 and or now 21 and all those decisions are now in your lap, you have no experience on how do you actually make a decision. So these are invaluable youth development experiences to actually be a part of planning and decision making. So in closing, what I would like to say is in terms of where the opportunities are, they are at each and every one of your tables. They lie in you and your belief in the young people that you work with, in your willingness to engage them, in your delivery of services and in your planning, in your willingness and the heart and soul you put into your work and your ability to do what all of those people in my life did for me, which is just to do a little bit more than what's in your job description, to see a little bit beyond sort of what's on paper about those young children that might sound so deterring, about who they are and what their needs are, and in really your willingness to give those second and third and fourth chances. So with that, I want to thank you all for your commitment and your work and your belief that change is possible, and encourage you to learn as much as possible today, and to think about what you can do once you return home to sort of realize that vision. And I think we have a couple of minutes, maybe 5 minutes, that I'm happy to take questions. Thank you all.
Any questions for Jennifer? No? Nothing? Okay, let's give Jennifer Rodriquez another round of applause. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer.